A little girl collapsed into tears the moment the new housekeeper stepped through the front door, clutching an old faded photograph to her chest and whispering words that froze everyone in the grand mansion. She insisted the woman was the one person her late mother had trusted more than anyone else, even though the family had never seen her before, and when the elderly billionaire looked into the housekeeper's trembling eyes, he realized she was carrying a secret capable of destroying everything his family believed about the past. The silence that followed was heavier than grief itself, because sometimes the greatest mysteries are hidden not inside locked safes, but inside broken hearts. If you believe in kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances, please take a moment to like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to our channel. Every story we share becomes stronger because of our community, and your support helps keep these emotional journeys alive. The woman standing at the entrance was named Meredith Hale, a quiet, middle-aged widow with gentle gray eyes and hands roughened by years of honest work. She wore a neatly pressed uniform that looked almost too simple for the luxurious estate owned by the Ashcroft family, whose wealth stretched across generations of shipping, construction, and charitable foundations. Meredith had spent years cleaning houses across neighboring towns, never staying long enough for anyone to ask many questions about her past. She preferred it that way. Carrying memories was already heavy enough without carrying explanations too. The Ashcroft mansion sat on rolling green hills surrounded by flowering gardens that bloomed brilliantly beneath the afternoon sun. Everything about the estate reflected success, yet inside its polished walls lived people who had forgotten how happiness sounded. Theodore Ashcroft had buried his only daughter, Evelyn, 3 years earlier after a sudden illness. Since then, every room had become quieter. His son-in-law had moved overseas, unable to bear the memories, leaving behind 8-year-old Clara to be raised by her grandfather. Clara smiled less with every passing month, speaking mostly through sketches she filled with flowers, birds, and a woman whose face nobody recognized. Meredith had accepted the housekeeping position because she desperately needed stable employment after losing the small apartment where she had lived for nearly 15 years. She told herself it was just another job. Dust would be dust, floors would need mopping, windows would need polishing, and she would quietly move on once again. She never imagined the address on the employment letter belonged to the one family she had spent decades trying to forget. When Clara rushed into the front hall after hearing the arrival of the new employee, she stopped so suddenly that everyone feared she had become frightened by a stranger. Instead, tears streamed down her cheeks. From the pocket of her little sweater she pulled a weathered photograph she had secretly carried everywhere. The picture showed her mother as a young woman standing beside another smiling woman whose face had been partially damaged by time. Meredith recognized the image instantly. It had been taken nearly 25 years earlier on a warm spring afternoon outside a children's shelter where both girls had once lived. The photograph slipped from Clara's tiny hands before Meredith caught it with trembling fingers. Theodore noticed the color drain from the housekeeper's face. Something far deeper than coincidence had just entered his home. Years before wealth, marriage, and privilege transformed Evelyn Ashcroft's life, she had been known only as Evelyn Brooks, a lonely teenager living in a charitable residence after losing both parents in a highway accident. Meredith had been 2 years older and became like an older sister to every frightened child who arrived there. She comforted nightmares, shared scarce meals, helped with homework, and often sacrificed her own chances at happiness so others could smile. Evelyn had adored her. Life separated them after adulthood. Evelyn unexpectedly discovered that Theodore Ashcroft was actually her biological grandfather through sealed adoption records, leading to a dramatic reunion that changed her future forever. Meredith celebrated Evelyn's good fortune, encouraging her to embrace the family she had finally found. They promised to stay in touch. Promises sometimes lose battles against time. Theodore invited Meredith into his study after recognizing the photograph. His voice remained calm, but inside he wrestled with confusion. Meredith finally admitted the truth she had hidden for years. She had known Evelyn long before the Ashcroft family ever found her. She had attended Evelyn's wedding. She had held baby Clara shortly after birth. Then, without warning, she disappeared from their lives. Theodore wanted answers. Meredith explained that shortly after Clara was born, doctors discovered she suffered from a severe heart condition requiring expensive treatment. Evelyn had quietly paid every medical bill without telling anyone, insisting that true kindness expected nothing in return. Meredith begged her not to spend so much money, but Evelyn refused. She believed gratitude lost its meaning if it demanded recognition. When Meredith recovered, she intended to repay the kindness by remaining close to the family. Instead, another tragedy struck. Evelyn's illness advanced rapidly. During those heartbreaking months Meredith visited often, helping care for Clara while Theodore traveled for business. One afternoon Evelyn made Meredith promise something unusual. She handed her a sealed envelope and asked her never to deliver it unless Clara someday desperately needed to understand who her mother truly was beyond newspaper headlines and charitable awards. Meredith honored that promise. After Evelyn's passing, Meredith arrived at the funeral carrying the envelope, but seeing Theodore overwhelmed by grief and Clara too young to understand anything, she lost the courage to approach them. She convinced herself the family deserved peace instead of reopening painful wounds. Days turned into months. Months became years. Shame grew heavier with every passing season until she believed it was too late ever to return. Now fate had carried her back through the front door as an ordinary housekeeper. Theodore struggled between disappointment and compassion. He wished Meredith had come sooner. Yet he also recognized the fear inside someone who had spent years believing she had failed a dying friend's final request. He asked to see the envelope. Meredith hesitated before placing it carefully on the polished desk. Inside rested several handwritten letters, children's drawings Clara had made as a toddler, and a journal Evelyn had written during the final months of her illness. None of it contained hidden fortunes or legal documents. The true treasure was far more valuable. Every page overflowed with hope. Evelyn wrote that wealth could build hospitals but never replace hugs. Success could purchase mansions but never guarantee laughter. She begged whoever eventually read the journal to make sure Clara grew into a woman known not for inheritance but for compassion. Theodore read every page beneath bright afternoon sunlight pouring through the tall windows. Tears quietly rolled down the face of a man famous for negotiating billion-dollar contracts without showing emotion. He realized he had spent years trying to preserve Evelyn's memory through buildings, scholarships, and public ceremonies while overlooking the simple values she cherished most. Meanwhile Meredith quietly began performing her work around the house. She cleaned forgotten family rooms no one entered anymore. She polished Evelyn's old piano until it reflected sunlight again. She planted fresh flowers beside garden benches where Clara liked drawing. She never asked for recognition. She simply served with quiet dignity. Clara slowly became attached to her. Instead of expensive toys, Meredith offered patience. Instead of perfect answers, she offered honest listening. She taught Clara how to bake simple bread from an old recipe Evelyn had loved years earlier. Flour covered their hands, laughter filled the kitchen for the first time in years, and Theodore found himself smiling outside the doorway without interrupting. As weeks passed, Meredith uncovered more than dust inside the mansion. She noticed longtime employees living in fear of making mistakes because everyone believed Theodore expected perfection. She gently encouraged kindness among the staff, thanking gardeners, cooks, drivers, and assistants for work that often went unnoticed. Gradually the atmosphere inside the estate softened. People greeted one another warmly instead of silently rushing through endless responsibilities. Theodore noticed the change. He also noticed something else. Meredith often paused before an old oak tree overlooking the valley. One afternoon he quietly followed her from a respectful distance. She placed fresh wildflowers beneath the tree and whispered a prayer. When Theodore approached, she admitted Evelyn had once dreamed of building a children's learning center there where orphan children could receive education, music lessons, and counseling without cost. Illness stole the opportunity before construction ever began. The dream had been forgotten. Until now. That conversation transformed Theodore more deeply than any board meeting ever had. For years he believed honoring Evelyn meant protecting the family's legacy. Meredith helped him understand that the greatest legacy was serving others with humility. Construction began only weeks later. Workers cleared the land under brilliant blue skies while architects redesigned plans around Evelyn's original handwritten sketches preserved inside the journal. Theodore insisted the center carry no family surname. Instead, it would simply be called the Open Door because Evelyn believed every child deserved one open door when life seemed filled with closed ones. News spread throughout the community. Journalists arrived expecting another story about billionaire philanthropy. Instead, they found Theodore introducing Meredith as the woman whose courage reminded his family what truly mattered. Cameras captured no dramatic speeches, only sincere gratitude between people who had finally chosen honesty over pride. Meredith resisted public attention. She insisted the story belonged to Evelyn and Clara, not herself. Yet everyone who met her recognized that quiet heroes often leave the deepest footprints. Months later the Learning Center welcomed its first children during a bright spring afternoon filled with music, balloons, and laughter. Clara proudly helped distribute books to every child entering the building. Theodore watched from nearby, realizing he had regained something money could never buy. Hope had returned to his family. Meredith prepared to resign after believing her purpose had been fulfilled. She packed her modest belongings into a single suitcase and quietly informed Theodore she would begin searching for another housekeeping position. He stopped her before she reached the front gate. Not because the mansion needed another employee. Because the family needed her. Theodore offered Meredith a permanent place in the household, not as a servant but as Clara's guardian, mentor, and cherished member of the family. He explained that titles mattered far less than love, and Meredith had already proven where her heart belonged. For several long moments she could not speak. She had arrived carrying guilt. She was leaving loneliness behind instead. Years after believing she had failed her dearest friend, Meredith finally understood that second chances often arrive wearing ordinary clothes and carrying cleaning supplies instead of miracles. Clara slipped her small hand into Meredith's as they walked together through the blooming gardens where butterflies floated beneath the warm afternoon sun. Theodore followed behind, smiling with peaceful eyes no longer burdened by regret. The mansion that once echoed with silence now carried the comforting sounds of family. Before this story comes to its close, we'd love to hear from you. Please leave a meaningful comment telling us whether you believe forgiveness is stronger than regret, or share a moment when someone gave you a second chance that changed your life forever. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. As another beautiful afternoon settled gently over the hills, sunlight streamed through every window of the Ashcroft home, illuminating polished floors once cleaned by a stranger who had quietly become family. The greatest secret the new housekeeper carried had never been hidden inside the envelope or the faded photograph. It was hidden inside the unwavering belief that love does not disappear when people are gone. It lives on through kindness, forgiveness, humble service, and the courage to return even when fear says it is too late. And in that house, where sorrow had once seemed permanent, hope finally found its way home.